Testing, testing, testing. You're welcome. Testing, testing. You're on.
Okay.
Yep, you're hot. Yep.
Hi.
Okay. How are you? Good to see you.
Okay. I think so. This is on, right?
Do I need
And
a mic or no?
So
Are you moderating this?
yeah.
Okay. Go ahead. Yes. Ivana, nice to meet you. Oh, and we're gonna do a selfie at the very end. Perfect.
Hello, hello. If everyone could start to make their way to their seats, that would be greatly appreciated. Wonderful. I didn't have to whistle or anything. I love it. Okay, so those of you that are sitting closer to the back of the room, if you want to make your way closer in to one of the spots that has a handout, that would be fabulous. If you choose not to because you have to head out early, just let us know and we'll get handouts into your hands. But we have a couple of interactive pieces that are sitting at the tables up here, and there are plenty of seats up front, like front row if you want to sit on the front row. And then one final housekeeping piece. If you did not sign in, we do have the sign-in sheet that's making its way around. We'd like to make sure that we just have everyone documented that's here today. It is not CE. It is just strictly for education purposes, and we're glad that you're joining us. Wonderful. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natalie Davis, and I am actually the 2020 chair for the SMEDRA IDE committee, formerly known as the Diversity Committee. So, we are now the Inclusion, Diversity, and Equality Committee. This year, we went through a name change and a quick little rebrand because we knew that we wanted to have the committee represent various pieces or various elements of diversity when it comes to diversity. Diversity is who we are. Inclusion and equality is what we're doing. So that's what has brought about this event today. So thank you for coming to the Diversity Challenges panel. It is our inaugural event, and we are excited that you guys are all here. So with that, I see a lot of new faces in the room, and I love it. You guys are not SMEDRA members and know that you are always welcome to attend SMEDRA events. But what I want to start off by doing is recognizing the board members and chairs or presidents, whatever it may be, for our affiliate associations and organizations that are with us today. So if you serve on any of the affiliate associations or organizations committees, please stand. Beautiful. Thank you, guys. Thanks for your leadership for those associations. I know the amount of work that goes into that. I'd also like to recognize the SMEDRA Board of Directors. If you guys are in the room, please stand. Thank you. Thank you. So I'd like to thank the board of directors, the SMEDRA board of directors specifically for approving the IDE committee. Like I mentioned, this is a newer committee here for SMEDRA. So thank you for entrusting us to move this initiative forward. With that, I am going to bring in our vice chair, Kelly Meyer, to come in and give you guys a quick update on how today will flow.
Thank you, Natalie. Before I begin, can we just give Natalie a round of applause? She's been doing so excellent. Well, it is an honor to be the vice chair of the Inclusion, Diversity, and Equality Committee here at SMEDRA. I wanted to first and foremost thank everybody for coming today. I appreciate it. So I just wanted to first just say thank you to Pat Argel of Caliber Home Loans. If Pat, will you stand up, please? And also to Karen Hyman of 210 Home Buyers Warranty. And they are sponsors for the event today. If we could give them a round of applause as well. And if you haven't already, I just wanted to quickly touch on the app that we're going to be using today. It's going to be interactive with everyone. So if you haven't already downloaded the Poll Everywhere app, you could download that in your app store. It's free to use. All of your answers in the questions that will be asked are going to be anonymous. Once you download the app, you're just going to go to join a presentation, and you're going to be putting in the username SMEDRA S085, and that is also up here. Once you get into the app, there's going to be a test question, and you can go ahead and answer that. Thank you again for coming. I'm going to hand the mic off to our MC, Vincent Grandy with Nagarup, if you would like to come up. Or Natalie, did you want to say something else? Cool. Sorry. Here, I'm handing it back to Natalie. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. So this is what your Poll Everywhere results will look like. I love that someone's favorite food is beautiful. Whatever that is, you guys enjoy it. So we will have, like Kelly said, it's going to be interactive. As we have questions for the audience members, we will have them appear on the screen. The responses will appear on the screen. And then some of the questions are going to be yes, no, or I don't know. Just answer those freely. If you don't know how you would respond to that specific situation, simply respond with I don't know. The next piece is the floating individuals that are walking through the room. You guys have probably seen so far. That's the IDE committee members. I could not go on without recognizing those. So all IDE committee members, if you could please stand to be recognized. Wonderful. So with that, any questions on the Poll Everywhere platform? Did everyone download it? Okay, if you did not, it's not going to be as fun. So you want to make sure that you download it. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Vincent, who's our MC today, but if you need help, those individuals that are IDE committee members that stood up are always available to help you. And on each table, if you don't have a setup already, you'll see this page that has blank lines for you to submit questions. The IDE committee members are happy to come by and pick those up. Just hold them up in the air or pass them down to the center aisle, and we'll grab those from you. These questions we're going to pose to the panelists at the very end. So any questions that you've come that are pressing today that you want answered, write them down. If you hear something today that sparks a question for you that you didn't know you had, write those down and we'll grab them as well. And we'll remind you guys as we go through. So now, without further ado, Vincent Grandy, who is going to be our MC for today. He is also the chair for the CAR Diversity Committee for the Colorado Association of Realtors, and he is going to represent NAGLRAP in today's presentation. So Vincent, thank you.
Does that work? Okay, there we go. Well, there you go. The on button always works, probably, huh? A little bit better. Anyways, you can direct any questions to our website for CAR or give us a call, and we'll reach out and answer any questions. So with that, we have just a great group of panelists here today, and we have some questions that we're going to be asking, and then some interactive with the audience for questions and answers as well. So kick off. I'd like to go around and ask everybody to please introduce yourself. Let us know what organization or committee that you're affiliated with, if you would, please.
Hello. It's on. Hello. I'll be here all week. So my name is Beth Ann. I'm with the Veterans Association of Real Estate Professionals. I'm the vice president of that great organization. We are a nationwide 501c3, and we represent the Denver chapter, which was just formed about a year and 2 months ago. So we're hitting the ground running and planning a lot of events and things, which I'll tell you about later.
All right. Thank you. Welcome, everybody, and Happy New Year again. My name is Angela Hutton Hall, and I am the Vice President of NARAB, which is National Association of Real Estate Brokers, and we're the Denver chapter here, and it's a national organization started in 1947. I also serve as the on the committee for the GAC, which is the Government Affairs Committee for Denver Metro Association of Realtors. I am the managing broker for City Park Realty. Our office is in Stapleton on 34th and Quebec, and I'm excited to be here and excited to hear the questions.
Thank you. My name is Gil Vasquez. I work with Keller Williams downtown, and I'm representing NARED, National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals.
I'll do my best to hold it. We'll see what happens. I think awesome. Make you stand there. Can you hear me? Whoa, you're heavy. I have absolutely nothing to do with realtors. My name's Kevin Williams, and I'm with the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition. And I was asked to join today. I'm really happy to see that you guys are doing this. I'm an attorney. I'm the legal program director, and what I do is sue people who don't comply with the Fair Housing Act. So, some of you might like me, some of you might not, but I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Nguyen. It's going to be our Chinese Vietnamese New Year this Saturday. I am currently serving as the Denver chapter president for ARIA, which is the Asian Real Estate Association of America. We have over 17,500 members. It was founded in 2003. It's currently the largest nonprofit Asian organization in all of North America. They've recently just started a global sector as well and are taking global memberships. So they are taking this organization global. And I work for REMAX Professionals.
Okay. Okay, so Lisa, if you want to hold the mic, and we will go right back to our next question. And this is for all the panelists as well. Why did you get involved with the organization that you're affiliated with right now? What brought you there?
So I got involved with ARIA because I noticed a need for fighting for certain things within our community. ARIA lobbies every year in Washington, D.C. So the work that we do is both local and national, and we fight for different inclusion and diversity in real estate. So last year when we lobbied in Washington, D.C., there was 3 initiatives that we fought for. It was alternative credit, because within a lot of the minority communities, they do qualify for loans, but as far as the qualification, sometimes it doesn't look perfect on paper. And so we fought for the government to look at maybe rental income or looking at cell phone bills. We also fought for diversity and inclusion as well as language access in loans, because there's a lot of research that shows that within the community, we have very high income, very high education. But as far as our national counterparts for home ownership, those numbers are still lower. So there's a gap within the reason why that there's the gap that exists. And so I joined the organization just because I want to raise awareness. We just started the Denver chapter in 2016 and just felt like it was very important for me to be a part of the organization so I can be an advocate within my community. So that's why I got involved with ARIA.
No, I think I got into it. Thanks. It was an accident. In several ways. I moved to Denver, Colorado, as a result of my accident that caused me to be in a wheelchair. And I was lucky to find this lovely place, and I've been here for 29 years. But the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition, which I should have said more about, is an organization, nonprofit organization that represents people with disabilities in many different ways. We work on statutory issues. We have a wonderful non-legal advocacy group that helps people with disabilities with all kinds of things, like dealing with Social Security bills, that sort of thing, finding accessible housing, that sort of thing. I found CCDC by accident. and I was lucky. I don't know if they found me or I found them, but you know, I had experienced my own life of. I mean, I've been disabled for 33 years. Um, I moved to Colorado 29 years ago, and I couldn't figure out why Denver was so wonderfully better than South Carolina, where I was living before. And in large part, it's because of the organization I work for and the very dedicated people with disabilities. We're run mostly by people with disabilities. And so that's how I got involved. And it was actually my boss, the executive director, who was supposed to come speak today, but I'm filling in as I am required to do. In any event, I'm happy to be here. But you know, because it's really weird. When I was going to law school, my boss came to the law school to do a talk about the reasons why she was having so much difficulty finding attorneys to address the issues of people with disabilities. And there I was graduating from the University of Denver College of Law thinking, what do I want to do with my life?
Thank you, Gil. Yes, I'm actually a Denver native, and I grew up here, and I grew up in the 80205 zip code. So I have lots of history about Denver and housing. So I got involved with NARAB because I want to make a difference. And we want to, as our goal, one of our goals at NARAB is democracy in housing. And one of the things that NARAB, or several things that NARAB does, is that we want to educate. That's our big thing, educate and empower particularly African American communities. Now, the goal, the national goal of NARAB, as well as our local chapters, is we want to increase home ownership in the African American community. Our goal is 2,000,000 in five. That means 2,000,000 new homeowners in the next 5 years. That is a challenge in itself, as you all know, those of you who are realtors, because we have no affordability. And so, one of the things that NARAB really prides itself on is fair housing for all. So, as we move forward for our goal of 2,000,000 in five, it's really about democracy in housing. We have come a long way, but we haven't come that far. The Fair Housing Act just had its 50th anniversary last year, and we are worse off in the African American community than we were before the act was enacted. That's a pretty sad statement. So now our goal as real estate professionals, because we're not just brokers that are members of NARAB, but we have real estate professionals ranging from title companies, inspectors, lenders. And so collectively, that is a goal of ours, is to make sure that we have increased home ownership. Now, you all know there's still predatory lending, there's lack of knowledge, there's lack of resources, especially in the African American community. And that's a really sad testament for us. And so the reason I got involved with NARAP is because I do want to make a difference, and I do want to see people create generational wealth through home ownership. And that only happens if we start educating and empowering our own communities. So we have a long way to go, but we're here for the long haul. And so one of the things that really drives me about being a part of NARAB is that we are growing as well. We've been around for a long time. We're one of the oldest minority trade associations in the country, having started in 1947. And we do have lobbying efforts going on in DC. There's chapters around the country, and we have what's called a Sheba report, and we'll talk about that later, as Natalie and I talked earlier. But it's the state of housing in Black America. And if anyone's interested in getting a copy of that report, just so you can see statistically what we're up against. And so it's a valiant effort that I'm glad to be a part of. And so we have several of our members in the room. Wave your hand if you're here, if you're a member of NARAB, if you want to wave your hand. So we're planted all over the place. So if you have any questions for us as we go throughout, we're here. We have a table in the back. But that's what drives me to be a part of this organization, is because I do want to make a difference. I grew up in a neighborhood that's totally gentrified now. I tell people this joke all the time when they say, well, where did you grow up? And I said in 80205. And now it used to have street credit, not anymore. That was when I was supposed to be tough. I grew up in 80205. But now it's like, really? So anyway, thank you all.
She's still tough. I don't want to mess with her. So, with the Veterans Association of Real Estate Professionals, interestingly, I am not a veteran. You're like, why is she up there? But you know what? My husband is. He's very cute. I love him a lot. He's got a good butt. He he does a lot for me. I was in a very bad relationship, and he probably saved me, so I can save him. He has been very severely affected by PTSD, um, and so over the years being with him, I have learned a lot about that from firsthand experience, from him having episodes and you know, running off literally. From him getting better and going to see a therapist and all sorts of different things. So there's a lot in there. And what I do in real estate is I try to be that stress reducer. Not only for veterans, but everybody, because it's a stressful process buying a home. It's not only stressful just for people, but it's stressful for other people who are in a service industry like firefighters, police officers. My husband was Army for 4 years. He had a bonus year tacked on, which he doesn't have on his DD 214. So, oh well, that's a longer story. He was a firefighter for 20 years, and I served those communities. When the opportunity came about to be on the board of the Veterans Association of Real Estate Professionals, I said, oh gosh, oh golly gee, I have to do this. I'm already involved as vice president of the Women's Council of Realtors Mile High Chapter. I'm involved with NAGREP. Um, I'm actually the president of Denver Mensa, which I probably shouldn't say because that's a geeky kind of thing. But oh, he's all right. I don't need that. When VA rep came up, I said, I need to do this. I just need to do this. What we stand for is three things: education of real estate professionals, and that can be lenders, title companies, real estate agents, educating them about the benefits of a VA loan. The second pillar is education of veterans. So we do a veterans housing summit, and we have lenders, title companies, home inspectors, everybody in a room where the veteran can walk around, learn from them, learn from different lectures, people who are teaching. And then the third pillar we stand for is raising funds, because what would it be without money for us to go to Washington, D.C. and campaign? Last year, one of our unicorn campaign statements was actually to have veterans and veteran status be a protected class under fair housing. We didn't get it. We're still fighting. But those are kind of the things that we stand for. That's why I feel passionate about this. And we're really, truly making a difference, seeing all these folks educated, the housing we give away, the donations we make. It's really nice.
Well, excuse me. What is NAREP? So National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. As you can see in the board right here, and every time it changes, there is one big name in there that comes on and comes on. So they say we want a big Mexican to come and represent. It's also the most consumed food. You eat a lot of this food. Almost all of you have tried this food, right? Um, but so the National Association of Hispanic. Why did I get involved? Um, to me, it was very important to get involved in this association. And before this one, it was another one that stayed and the state, and we merged them. The CARREP, which was Colorado Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, and the reason was because we have the national presence as a national association, but these guys have worked really hard. When I see what they were doing, they have worked, lobbying, uh, from Washington all the way down to the local area here. Right now, one of the goals for Denver, the only chapter that is in here, is to create three chapters, one in Colorado Springs and one in Fort Collins. And it's because we want that representation for the Hispanic person, not just the Mexicans, even though we are more. But in general, is everybody who comes and speaks Spanish, and anybody who has a background in Spanish, anybody who has that opportunity to be educated here in this country with the laws of this country and be able to obey those laws. So I think for us, it comes from the internal perspective, and that's what I like, that we want to educate our members first because they like to go like the Wild West. They hear this was the Wild West, so sometimes they don't like to do the things the right way, and we saw that one the last before the recession, and a lot of Hispanics got caught up in that um, beautiful economy that we have, and now we had it again. But fortunately, we have found more and more ethical honest guys working the fields. And we want to empower them first so they can empower their clients to be proud to be homeowners and to know that by doing that, their families, the kids can have better grades and do all that. So all that stuff got to me since I have 8 kids. But that got to me because it's very important that the family, um, the center of the family is the main thing when you are a homeowner. It's not just the American dream, it's everything that comes with it. All the education that my peers have talked about it, that you guys work for it, is educating them correctly to do it the right way and to be able to abide by the laws and be able to pass that to their clients. And their clients will be able also to be owners the right way in this country.
So I'll speak on behalf of NAGOREP. So NAGOREP is the National Association of Gay and Lesbian Real Estate Professionals. We have uh, approximately 40 chapters throughout the United States, and we actually have representation in Canada as well. We have our Canadian neighbors come down for our events as well. Um, One of the main reasons why I am involved in the Denver chapter is because of fair housing and the Equality Act. I'll start back with fair housing. Fair housing, as we just mentioned, just celebrated its 50th year last year, so we're actually in year 51 right now. And although we are excited to think of all the how far we have gotten over the last 50 years, I mean, if you think about it, the women in the audience here and the panelists, if you go back to the early 70s, you had to ask permission from your husband to apply for credit, to get a credit card. If you wanted to buy a home, you had to have somebody co-sign for you. So it's pretty remarkable to think that that's how things work. And we have, you know, I think in the industry we have gotten better, but again, even after 50 years, we still have not gotten to where we need to go. And particularly in my community, because out of the 50 states, only 21 states have a extra layer of protected class for fair housing, because under fair housing, sexual orientation does not fall under that. However, 21 states in the United States do have that, and Colorado, fortunately, is one of them. So that means 29 states in our country, it is legal for somebody to say, I'm not going to sell my home. I'm not going to represent you as a customer. I'm not going to rent to you because of who you are. And you can specifically state that in writing or to somebody verbally, and it is okay. Even though Colorado has a protected class, we still have issues going on. We have lawsuits right now of people being discriminated to either rent an apartment. We have, an issue over the last year right here in the metro area where a gay couple were denied to purchase a house over a heterosexual couple, even though the circumstances of them putting more money down, offering a higher amount on the purchase price. They were specifically told by the seller that they didn't want to sell to their type, and the realtor that was involved went along with the situation. So there's a lot that that people aren't aware of, but that's what happens in every day. Um, but the big one is, and then also too is credit. Credit actually has absolutely no protection throughout the United States. So legally, although it doesn't happen all the time, but legally, a same-sex couple can be denied on a home loan because of who they are and how they identify themselves, and that is actually a legal part that we're trying to change as well. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does. And if it did happen, you couldn't take it to court because it's allowed. And then the Equality Act. So the big one for us, our organization, is that we are fighting very hard to have the Equality Act passed. We have a seat on HUD. So NAGROP actually has a seat on HUD in Washington, D.C. We go every April to Washington, D.C., and we meet with our lawmakers, and we go to the Capitol, and we get to meet with both sides of the aisle, and we have very good conversations and dialogue about just what we want. And again, our opponents, I guess you would say, feel that we are asking for something more than the average American, and we're not asking for anything more, but we're not going to accept anything less. We just want to be equal across the board with everybody. So And that's kind of where it gets a little bit gray with a lot of people, because people always think that we are trying to get something a little bit more than what they have, and people are. You can't have more than what I have. So that's always seems to be the argument. But the Equality Act not only helps the LGBTQ community, which it helps a tremendous amount, but it helps a lot of different types of minorities throughout the United States, women in particular, when it comes to equal pay. Um, so, so that's just something we've been fighting for. And finally, because the the way the House of Representatives sits, in May of 2019, a vote came in, and the Equality Act was passed in the House of Representatives. After 4 years of trying, it finally passed. And now the way our government works is now it has to go into the Senate, and then the Senate has to present the bill to the floor, and then they have to have open discussion, and then they have a vote. And if they vote yes, then that goes to the president's desk, and then the president signs off. Well, it's sitting there because the House Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, says that he will not even present it to the floor for open discussion. And our current administration said that even if the Equality Act was to pass, that he would veto it and turn it down. So it's not going to get signed in his administration. So that is our story, and that's why we have our over 40 plus chapters throughout the United States. We just want to be treated equally and fairly like everybody else. We have the LGBTQ community could actually be its own country, and it would be an awesome country, I'm telling you, because we have over $1 trillion right now in buying power on an annual basis for goods and services within our community. So could you imagine what the addition to the economies, the local economies in the 29 states that discriminate against housing, if more people can buy more houses in those cities, what that would do? And because we all know what happens when someone buys a home, what it does to the economy. So again, that is our big fight, and will continue to fight and march on until we have the same rights. Thank you. Okay, so are we going to go to the audience polling now? Okay. So now we have our audience polling question. Have you or your clients ever experienced discrimination while working in this industry?
Yes.
So we have that right there. No, they're going to do the poll. They have a poll that they're going to. That's pretty remarkable that we have 57%, and that always seems to be the case. We always seem to when you're in a.
Never mind.
Oh, it's moving. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Everybody's. We'll wait till everybody's finished. Maybe you're not all finished. Okay, so I think is everybody done? We're all done. Awesome. Okay, so again, the question: Have you or your client ever experienced discrimination while working in the real estate industry? 62% say yes, 34% no, and then we have 3% that said they're unsure, they don't know. And I think that's pretty significant, especially here in Colorado, because I'm assuming our answer is based on all the people that we're working with here in Colorado, unless somebody does multi-state lending or sales in real estate. The majority of us here, this question pertains to our business experiences here in Colorado. And Colorado, again, is a very progressive state. It has one of the most protected laws in our country. So think about here in Colorado and all the protections we have here. Could you imagine what it would be like in another state that doesn't have all those type of protections? So I think it's pretty alarming to see that still happens, even though we have laws that say that you can't do it. And that discrimination goes for all of everybody that's representing here, and then others that are not representing here. Because think about it too. Discrimination, in my opinion, is not a visible piece. Discrimination can be very invisible. When you meet somebody, you don't know who, what, or where. We don't know their story, and that does just because I think when we hear the word discrimination, people think of color. Probably the first thing that's going to come up, or if you hear somebody speaking the English language and they're not speaking maybe as clear as somebody else, and they may have like a dialect or something that we would think, okay, then they must be, of a minority class. But there are people who are disabled that their disability is not visible. And again, I go back to the women, but you know, I mean, think of it, what has happened over so many years with voting rights, and as of today, just think about equal pay. It's pretty alarming on equal pay. Um, they did a study, and um, equal for when it comes to equal pay, and this is compared to a white male, that women get paid as low as 47 cents on the dollar, depending on their minority, their race, or wherever they identify with. So it's pretty alarming. Okay, so then the next question we're going to go to is, tell us who you are. Wait, we did that already, right? That's on there again. Back one. Okay, sorry. Next one. Okay, so we'll start out with you, sir.
Yep.
What are some of the key issues and or hurdles that you feel the organization currently faces in regard to diversity, equality, and inclusion in the community, and how does your organization plan to overcome them?
Well, we start with it. We talk about that part, but in our organization, we are creating this year 4 different events, and, and those events gonna be very important of how we educate these people. And if I can mention them really quick,
Mhm.
so we started in um, February 6th, and that is gonna be the getting all the positions of the board members, the installation of the board members. It's gonna be a dinner, and then it's gonna be um, lawyers in the area. They're going to be talking specifically about deeds, contracts, and HOA issues. Uh, we find that a lot of our members, some of the complaints that come in, has to do with HOA and how they HOAs want to dictate how they live. But it's not so much what they don't want to do, but it's like they gone to the extreme with them
Mhm.
in that particular. Um, how the crimes affect the rates and affect real estate values and the opportunity zones and the zoning in some areas and the planning and zoning in some areas. That's what we're going to be talking that day. Then we go to we go to May. Then we go to July, and July is one of my favorite ones because they're going to be talking about NAREP 10 specifically and what it does in that particular event. They're going to be talking a lot of this part of the education, but how can you position yourself as a Hispanic in the market and put yourself competitive on the market? Um, so again, I think our organization, I don't think, I know NAREP is not looking to the fault of the discrimination. It's looking at how to fix that and what is the inside of the members and how to put them in a position that they're competitive enough that even discrimination issues come in place, they know how to defend themselves, they know how to voice it. Because coming from different countries, South American countries, third countries, they they, they learn to not say anything. They learn to just swallow it and move on. And that's one of the things that we don't want our members to do anymore. We want them to voice their right of home ownership and the things that come along with real estate.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Uh, Golly, that's tough to follow. That's good information. Um, I'm actually going to start with uh, discrimination. And I have a little story. This is a friend of mine, Sean, that I'm helping out who, buy a house probably about a year ago. And he was Navy and then he went Army. There's a joke in there somewhere, but he's a great guy. He was actually in Bosnia, um, Afghanistan, and Iraq. He's been blown up more times than you want to know. He has some disabilities. They are all combat related. Um, he even faces discrimination from the VA on increasing his disability percentage. But when purchasing a home, we had found a couple properties he loved. went in with an offer, and the agent on the other side specifically told me that she wouldn't accept VA offers because she felt the appraisal process would take too long. She had VA on her little sheet. Um, sorry, I'm kind of bitter, but I mean, I don't know what I need to do in those situations. I hum the Star Spangled Banner or something. I mean, to tell her that this is a disabled veteran is getting into the buyer love letters, and we all know how that story goes. Um, but it's that type of thing. So we as VA reps start with the education. I think that's the only thing we can do. I'm not going to force something down this agent's throat to say, "Oh, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong." It's just going to make the problem worse, especially for my veteran. Um, but I want to advocate on Sean's behalf as much as I'm able to, and educating the community, educating veterans is, I think, the way to do that. So we have a bunch of events coming up. Lauren is in the back. Hi, Lauren. She's our membership chair. We have happy hours, which are very education based. Don't worry. We, we have lunch and learns. We have actually an 8-hour military veteran housing certification. Um, we break it into 2-hour lunch and learns, which is very easy to swallow with lunch. But it's a great way to educate yourself, your fellow real estate professionals, whether it's a lender or a title company. Invite them. More people who get involved, and the more people who have the right facts, I think it's just critical.
Yeah, these are tough acts to follow, but I think there's a common thread with all of them is it's discrimination. And so one of the things that we tackle at NARAB is that indeed is democracy in housing, as I mentioned before, and also to educate and empower. That's important, and to mobilize our communities into educating our millennials. Even as you know, the statistics are saying that millennials aren't even buying right now. There's so many rentals in Colorado. There's rentals everywhere. Every time I go down another street, I see a new apartment complex going up, and I'm a little discouraged because we need some for sale properties. Okay, for sale, not for rent, for sale properties. So the way we plan to tackle it, and we have several things going on in the we have a planning meeting every year, and we just had our planning meeting with the executive board. We're going to partner with development people who do development, and that's sort of outside of our realm. Sometimes when we talk about what real estate agents do, we have to expand our sphere of influence and start partnering with the people who are decision makers, and that's important. I did a stakeholder group, and Stephen Tillman back there. Raise your hand, Stephen. He was on that group with me as well. He is a mortgage person with Universal Lending, but some of the things we discovered and some of the things that are happening at what was considered to be affordable housing process in the city and county of Denver. I can only speak to city and county of Denver. I don't know what else is going on in the other cities, but it's hurdles that we have to overcome. They're designed to the program is designed to get people into housing, but it seems like there's always a hurdle that we have to overcome. We hit brick walls all the time. So part of our goal as NARAB is to address those issues. That issue and that initiative came out of NARAB. We asked for that meeting with the stakeholders. And so I believe now we're making some strides, but we have to really stay on it, partnering with our legislators. We have, as you know, car representatives here. Liz came to our meeting, and she told us a lot about what's going on at the state capitol. I mean, there are so many things affecting our industry that not only affects us as a whole, but it's even a greater impact when you talk about people that are of minority descent, or that they consider those who don't have the economic advantage. And so it's sad to me to see people who have been in Colorado all their lives not able to afford to live in this city anymore. They're moving out just as fast as people are moving in. I don't know if you realize that, but people are moving out of here as quickly as they're moving into Denver. So that's part of what we're doing at NARAB. We have monthly meetings, and at those monthly meetings, it's our think tank. We do have CEs that we provide, but a lot of times we're getting all of the professionals together. We're getting our lenders, we're getting our mortgage companies, we're getting our title companies, and all of those together so that we can start empowering and educating our communities so that we can mobilize. And one of the things I think is important, especially in the African American community, is creating generational wealth. I didn't say what I also do, but I'm also a licensed attorney in the state of Colorado. and I went to DU as well. And one of the things that I am so passionate about is affordable housing. And we need that more than anything. So part of what we are doing at NARAB is to make sure we have a voice at every table that we possibly can. If yeah, yeah, thank you. Yes, I'll go with that one. Yes, yes. And start building alliances and partnerships so that we can make an impact, because that is, as we hear, that's a common thread, the discrimination. And why aren't we able to afford it? I mean, I love the growth in Colorado, don't get me wrong, but we have to be cognizant of what we're doing. Where some of these things that are happening are unintended consequences. And we see that because we live it. Our clients, we're educating our agents, educating our clients, providing resources so that we can be armed and ready for that next level, whatever that is. And I know Colorado's going to continue to grow. I drive the I-70 corridor every day. When I say every day, every day. And that whole project is just blowing my mind. But it's because we're growing. But when we're growing, we're losing sight of our communities. So that's one of our push at NARAB, is to make sure we continue to educate and empower by creating partnerships, alliances in any way that we can, so that we can make sure we stay educated and we stay above and beyond the issues. And I think a lot of times we get buried in the issues and we lose what's really important. And so we're going to really focus on our generational wealth and building in our communities.
So, at the Asian Real Estate Association of America, I think some of the issues that we deal with within our community, one is language. So, 71% of Asian families have two languages or more. So, when they're applying for loans within the community, oftentimes there's discrimination. They see a name and then they assume that maybe you don't speak English well, and there is a lot of that as well. And so I think that that is the gap with one of the huge hurdles that our community has to overcome is when we're going through the loan process. It's, there's young children translating for parents, and there's multi-generational households, and that's another issue that I want to bring up. The language part then translates into families. A lot of Asian households, like the Latino and Hispanic communities, they live together. So there's parents with children. And so when they're looking for homes, sometimes it's not just for a family, it's for an elder or somebody else. And so that I had never experienced this before, but it brings me into the family portion of discrimination. Fair housing isn't just about race or color. I am a minority female, but I'm also a mother of two children. I am currently pregnant, so if you see me twitching or moving around, it's because I'm either getting kicked or feeling uncomfortable or adjusting up here. But I recently, at the place that I live at, got discriminated for familial status. And so I feel like that's an important thing to bring up, especially as the community lives together in families a lot. And I had never experienced something like this in my life until I moved into the place that I was now and started to be looked at differently because of being a family. And people don't realize that that's also a protected class. Um, I feel like as a woman too, sometimes there's discrimination within jobs that, you disclose that you're pregnant or you have children, you're looked at differently, which I don't think that you should ever do. I mean, we all came from a woman. So at the end of the day, when you're sitting there saying that your they brought their kids, or um, somebody did this. I think most recently somebody was like, well, who developed all this? And I said, well, who gave birth to them? It wasn't the man. The men all came from women. So I look at things from that part. And ARIA is an organization. We also have looked towards discrimination internationally. So there's in the State of Asia report, if you Google that, it's put out by REMAX and ARIA nationally. There is statistics and demographics about the Asian community, but also the money that's coming in from foreign investors. in different countries. And us as realtors last year within our purchase contract, FIRPTA appeared, and everybody's like, what's FIRPTA? Foreign Real Estate Tax Act of 1980. It's been around since 1980, but nobody really knows too much about it until it affects them. And what that is it's a tax that has to be taken out if your seller is a foreign investor. And, people are like, well, I don't work within the community, but I'm like, what if you are the buyer's agent and you don't catch that and the tax is not pulled out at closing? Guess who it comes back upon when you're going to sell that property? So it's on our purchase contract for a reason, but it's something that people don't have too much knowledge about. Within our community, too, sometimes we're discriminated in the sense that, are you foreign? They see your name, your last name a certain way, automatically assume you're foreign. I have clients that speak perfect English, but um, just as education, you may want to ask questions like, do you pay taxes in this country, or do you have a citizenship? I think a lot of the discrimination, it's not intentional, but it's because of lack of knowledge, of understanding that foreign part of it. And I think that as realtors too, we need to pay attention to that foreign money that's coming in from the country, from other countries, because there's billions and billions of dollars that are starting to affect our markets, our investments. And, outside of the realm, I always try to talk about, we look at residential, but then there's so much money just coming in commercially, or people coming in from other countries because of the way that their government is. Their money's not safe where they're at. So a lot of people are pouring money into the United States. And so ARIA works as a force to educate people so that they understand what's happening from other countries coming into our country. With that said, some of the different events that we have within the ARIA Greater Denver chapter is we teach classes that are a little bit different, like feng shui within houses, how to work with a foreign investor, um, immigration laws. Those are some of the classes that we offer. If you guys want more information, it's just areaa.org. And if you join, you are also allowed to attend the national events. And with the global sector, they've allowed you to travel globally with ARIA as well. Last year, I got to go to China, which is a really great experience. This year, ARIA is traveling to Mexico City, to Korea, and then back to China again. So as a member, if you want to learn about foreign investment and learn about how to do real estate in other parts of the world, last year they went to Dubai. They're traveling all over the world and expanding the education on how to work with people from around the world. Because if you start paying attention to the demographics, within the next 20 years or so, 1/3 of our population is going to be mixed. This conversation about minorities is not going to be the same type of conversation, because the same people that are being called minorities won't be the minorities anymore in the next 20 years. So
So first of all, as I said, I'm not a member of the industry. Second of all, I'm a white male. I would apologize, but I blame my mother and father. I do, however, excuse me, kick ass for the rights of people with disabilities. So I feel like I'm accomplishing something. But what I wanted to add to this conversation, um, discrimination against people with disabilities is quite different in some ways. By the way, one of our other speakers said, discrimination is the same across the board. And I want to agree with that. There's two types of discrimination that my clients experience, especially in, say, buying a home. One is, well, and I look, by the way, cross disability does not mean people with disabilities. It means we represent people with all kinds of disabilities. Lots of veterans are coming into my office these days with all kinds of problems, including housing issues. But the first kind of discrimination is just real simple, straightforward, on off, just like you all experience, which is, you have a disability. I don't really like that. I don't want to deal with you, and boy, are you going to have enough money to be able to afford a loan on this house? They're just prejudgments that are made about somebody because they have a disability. What about, oh, you're going to love this one, emotional support animal. All right. So, my client goes into the realtor's office or goes in to get a loan. That's the most common example with his service. In that case, it would be a service animal and wants to buy a house. And the problems start. I mean, there. It's sort of a cavalcade of problems. The person who wants to sell the house discriminates against the person with the service dog. The people who are selling the house think that it just creates all sorts of problems. So there is a sort of on-off type of discrimination against people with disabilities. There is another huge problem of discrimination against people with disabilities. I love the idea of expanding houses and the creation of houses and single family homes. I also love the idea that family and home are two of the most important things. I think that's what you said in our lives. Wouldn't you all agree? We just went through a holiday season, and I would suspect that most of us spent time at somebody's house, cooking dinner, having dinner, hanging out, maybe a bottle of wine, hopefully a fireplace, if you can afford, depends on what zip code you're in. Single family homes do not have to be accessible to people who use wheelchairs. That's what the Fair Housing Act says. It only applies to multi-family housing. Now, for you guys, that would just mean condominiums, basically. I mean, that's it. So when I buy a house, as I did, I'm in the 80222 area code. I did that only so that I could remember my zip code. That's the only reason I put that. But in any event, I bought a house from somebody who had made extensive renovations. But consider buying a home, consider the market in Denver, in Colorado in general, and then consider for people with disabilities the enormous cost of making that home accessible. I can tell you the former owner of my house probably put $30,000 to $40,000 into making changes. I have, on top of that, I've done quite a bit myself, but we don't have a choice, and that seems ridiculous. And why? I will tell you, I wanted to raise a point. I don't want to talk just about uh, discrimination against people who use wheelchairs because there's all kinds of discrimination against all kinds of people with all kinds of disabilities. And I've represented them all. I will tell you that HOAs, I love HOAs. Hey, hey, every time somebody calls me and they say, I had a problem with my HOA, come into the office. Come into the office. I want to talk to you. Because what happens is, and I mean, the emotional support animal, service animal, real common example. There's a no pets policy. It doesn't really happen when you're buying a house, but those kind of. I'm trying to think. Requests for reasonable accommodation. Here's how disability discrimination differs. Requests for reasonable accommodation and requests for modification to policies, practices, and procedures. What the hell is he talking about? Those are all required. They're required under the ADA. So if you're dealing with, if I go into your a realtor's office, we might deal with accessibility issues. We might deal with other kinds of discrimination. Um, but so oftentimes discrimination against people with disabilities is in order to treat me equally, you might have to do something differently than you do for everybody else. Equal treatment for, I'll give you an example. I just parked outside. I need an 8 foot wide access aisle to get out of my van. If you gave me a parking space that was normal, it wouldn't work. So that's another kind of discrimination that people with disabilities face all the time. I think in this industry, I would say honestly, the community that I represent, the biggest problem uh, is affordability. I mean, and it's getting worse. I mean, the community people with disabilities. And by the way, how many realtors do we know who have disabilities? You don't have to self-identify; it's not required. In fact, I'd be violating the law if I did that. But how many realtors do we know with disabilities? How many? Why is that? What's going on here? And I'm sitting here. How many of you want to sell me a house? How many of you are going to take me to that house today and show it to me? And how are you going to do that? I'll stop.
Okay. Thank you. So for NAGOREP, our main issues are again fair housing, and I'm going to bring two stories to you. One is a lesbian couple, retired lesbian couple in St. Louis. This went to the Supreme Court, and it didn't go well. So one of the two women went into a sales office of a 55 plus community, and she sat down, and like anybody else, we don't all walk in and say, "Hi, I'm Dave, and I'm heterosexual," and right, we just walk in and we talk to the salesperson. So she went into the sales office, got a tour of the community, sat down, went over pricing and all kinds of things about the community, and she just said, started talking about her. She started using the term "my family," and just was really excited about it and really enjoyed it, really liked it, and said, I think, they think this is it. We've been looking a lot, and I think this is really it. And then she went on to say, but I have to go home. I want to discuss this with my wife, and I want to share with her this, and then I'm going to, bring her back. And the saleswoman had a big glaze on her face and just stood there, shook her hand, and let the potential new homeowner leave. That evening, and she already had given all her information to the sales office. That evening, she received an email from the sales office, from the saleswoman who was in that office, and said, um, we have reviewed your application, but unfortunately, your type of people do not fit within our community standards. We are more Christian based, and we're not going to sell it was a condominium complex, so we're not going to sell the condo unit to you. It's gone through the process here in our sales office, and we're denying you to purchase this. So it went through the judicial system in the state of Missouri, and then it went all the way to the Supreme Court. They lost because the state of Missouri has no protection for sexual orientation. So it was legal for that sales office to do that. And then we had another one. This just happened recently, and this was actually to one of our own members down in the South. I'm not sure which state, but it was down in the South, and particularly that's where a lot of our complaints come from with our membership is our southern states chapters. It's pretty unbelievable what goes on. It's very, very fortunate to be where we're at here in Colorado. So his neighbor came across the street and knocked on his door and said, I'm going to be selling my house. I know you're a realtor. I've chosen another realtor. But I want to make really clear with you that you don't bring your people in to show my house and sell it. Because if you do, I'm not going to sell my home to anybody that you bring in to show. So could you imagine if your neighbor came to you and said that to you? I mean, but this goes on even in Colorado, unfortunately, not as much, but this is everyday life for our members of our community, is to have that happen. So that is the biggest piece for us, is just the equality and the fair housing piece. Okay. And now this is the next question is for everybody. Uh, have any members of your organization experienced okay, have any members of your organization experienced discrimination complaints about HOAs in the past? And if so, what complaints have been received? The most recent or most repeated offense? That's your question. Yeah, yeah. So I'll read it again. Have any members, this goes to our panel, I'm sorry, have any members of your organization experienced discrimination complaints about HOAs in the past? And if so, what complaints have been received? And if you would please answer as the most recent or most repeated offense.
I can tell you that I personally haven't we haven't got one organ on the organization, but I have personally have an experience. So me having 6 kids originally, um, I got a letter from the HOA saying that my kids cannot play in the front yard because the neighbors start complaining that they're making too much noise when they are sleeping because they work in the evening or at night. So when my kids come out, and I got 5 boys and 1 girl, and they're rampacious, and so they come out and put the buckets and start doing, sounds at 6, 7 in the afternoon in summer. People go to sleep until 10. But anyway, but the HOA get involved. So I got to a point where we talk about it, and that part got resolved. And then I discovered in my HOA that they were not listening to the complaints of the people that was doing, and especially Hispanics, that they were complaining because and this particular builder um, has poorly constructed materials on it, and they start falling. So they go to the HOA, and the HOA pretty much saying go talk to the builder, but their um, warranties already expired. So the next one was the HOA to step up and do this part, and it was part of the HOA's written, and they just pretty much didn't listen to them. And like I say, they had to swallow it out of their own pocket, fix all these problems that they were having, and it was the HOA issue. They needed to come and fix part of the drainage and some of the materials that got corroded because water comes into these homes. But the HOA didn't step in, and the insurances they didn't want to do it either because part of the bylaws or the laws on the HOA were already written that they would take care first on their part, and after that the insurance will kick in. So yeah, these guys out of their own pocket has to fix all that stuff. So I have seen it, you know, firsthand. I don't know how much is out there. I think at this point, a lot of builders have fixed a lot of this stuff, but also I think most people don't speak up, especially HOAs. It's not too much of a big deal. Now, let me tell you something. You guys falling asleep here, right? I just gonna mention this. How moronic is this? You multifamily, right? What is multifamily? But you can have only one family there, right? Single family, but you want to have more than one family there.
That's a good point. So I'm going to answer the question a couple different ways. And the first way I'll answer it is simply communication. Our organization, VA Rep, has not received a huge amount of complaints, but we hear communication, we hear stories, and in real estate, I hear complaints from my buyers and sellers that they have different views, and it's difficult for them, the mindset, the communication. And I'll give you an example. I can talk about him because he's my husband, but he has a prejudice against Iraqis because he had to go to war, because he had to sit in his tank and watch across the field while the Iraqis were killing people and massacring um, the indigenous cultures. He had to watch it, and he couldn't do anything, and that's just the way it is. So prejudice, prejudging, he has prejudged the Iraqis. It's just a thing, and he feels bad about it. And we have in another club we're in, we have a couple friends who are Iraqis, and they're wonderful people, and we love them a lot. My husband loves them a lot, but he knows he has this issue because it's been ingrained in his mind because he was in a tank and it's war and it's a thing. So I hear from my real estate clients that, they're in a condo complex or a townhome complex, and, there's children of, a certain ethnic background, and they're playing and they're making a lot of noise. And it's probably not your kids because it's a different complex. But it's just, if there's a certain mindset and you have certain experiences in your life, they're formative experiences when you're 17 or 18 years old and you're asked to shoot people. And it's just, it's a communication thing. So I don't hear the complaints that maybe my veteran home buyer has lodged a formal complaint with the HOA, but I do hear him speaking of these stories and these situations. And how do I counsel that? We stand for a lot of education. I spoke about that. I think that's a start. And when I'm having these conversations with my veterans, let's talk about these sort of things, and let's take a step back. Let's reduce the stress. Let's calm down for a second. Let's look at the situation. Do we need to move? Can we have a conversation with the parents? How do we also start with communication in solving this issue? And the second way I'll solve it is with some super boring statistics, but I think they drive home the point well. I think the other aspect of complaints that, well, actually we don't hear because veterans don't know. 2014 study showed 85% of veterans did not receive VA loan information during or after their military service. 85%, that's almost all. 62% said lenders never offered VA loans as an option. So most veterans don't even know they can be in this situation to have the experience to even make conditions better for themselves. So that's why we almost never get to the complaint sometimes.
Well, I personally have not had an HOA issue because I was the president of the HOA. But aside from that, don't hurt me for that. It was years ago, 20 years ago. But one of the things I can't beat them jointless, right? But one of the things I did as the president of the HOA when I first moved in my neighborhood, before I bought in the neighborhood, they said, "Oh, don't move there. They're just like they're gonna make you do all this stuff to your house and whatever." And it said covenant controlled community. How many people have that in their neighborhood right now where it says covenant controlled? I changed all the signs because I had that right. I was a president. They're now covenant protected communities. That implies something different than control. And you think about this protection of your property values. Because in an HOA, people can get, if there's no HOA, as you know, you can tell what neighborhoods don't have HOAs and which ones do. So I changed it to covenant protected because that changes the mindset of people and the people who serve on the board. You're not controlling anything. This is about protection of people's property values. And so when I think about HOAs, I have a two-part response to this. One, I get a lot of questions because I am an attorney. I get a lot of realtors who call me about various things, and I'm okay giving them free advice because they're my friends and I don't charge. But one of the things I heard just recently was HOAs taking over people's homes because of excessive fines and liens on your property. And as you know, HOA liens are considered super liens in the state of Colorado, which means they can go before your first mortgage and they can foreclose on you if you don't get those fees paid. And because I've served on the Government Affairs Committee for DMAR, there's legislation now before this particular legislative session about HOA fees and transparency of those fees. I'm excited about that because a lot of times you don't know what's going on behind the scenes with HOAs. And I can tell you as a president, there's some pretty crazy stuff. But you have to be aware of that, of what's going on. So part of what we need to do in this industry is educate our buyers and sellers about HOAs and really what they do and what they're not supposed to do. So hopefully this new legislation will help us all out by giving us some regulatory backbone to go against these HOAs and start getting fees that we can see the transparency of the fees so that we don't have situations where they're putting liens on our clients' homes and excessive liens and selling people's properties. And so I personally have not had an issue with an HOA because I understand them, but I believe it's part of educating people about what an HOA is supposed to do and your role in that. How many people actually attend your HOA meetings? I mean, really, you want to people complain about it, but they don't get involved. And when I was president of my HOA, I would knock on doors. Hey, we're having a meeting at 6:30. Come on, we need to hear your what's going on. But part of it is really being involved. It's an awareness issue. So I think we can work collectively and start educating people about HOAs. And I'm not saying that just because I was the president. I just really feel for people who I know who have lost their homes in a sale through a super lien. So I don't have a personal story, but I do wish we would become more educated about our HOAs, and hopefully this new legislation will allow them to be more transparent in the fees you're getting charged for lack of whatever that is. If you're in violation of a covenant and you haven't done anything to change that, they are going to start fining you every day for that lack of remediating that covenant, whatever that is you violated. And but remember, if you start with the premise that it's about covenant protection versus control, I think we can get a lot of leverage out of that.
So I'll start just with ARIA, some of the discrimination that we face just locally. I know in 1980, I wasn't even allowed to join my realtor board, which is baffling to me. That wasn't that long ago. And, obviously we've come a long ways, but I actually coincidentally have a personal story to share because I have been discriminated against recently, and it's the first time it's ever happened to me by the HOA in the place that I reside. I moved in there about a year ago, and it first started with knocks on the door when I'm cooking dinner, and they're saying, you know, to my significant other, you have your workers up here working. And I'm thinking, are they insinuating that I'm the worker? And I'm like, no, I'm just up here cooking dinner. And that was the first time they came. And then the second time, about a week later, we get another knock on the door. "Well, you guys are up here doing construction and working." And I'm like, I don't even know how to do construction. I can't even hang a bookshelf. I can assure you I don't know anything about that. And then the third knock came like another week later. And each time they asked to enter the property because they had to double check that somebody wasn't up there working. And I finally attended my first HOA hearing, and I went in front of the board and I said, besides the fact that it's a little offensive, I can assure you I'm not one of the workers. Stop knocking on the door and assuming that I'm one of the workers. And I thought, to myself, just be quiet. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. And then, sure enough, like things just continued to get a little bit worse. I did notify them that there was a family living in there now, and the building in which we live, there's virtually no minority families, probably 380 units. We're probably the only minority family in the building, and I try not to take things personally, but um, I'm going in the elevator and people are like, "Are you guys visiting to go to the pool?" I'm like, "No, we're going downstairs to get breakfast." So me and my kids are getting breakfast, and they're like, "The pool's not filled up right now, right?" I'm like, "I know that it's winter time. Like I'm just getting breakfast with my kids." Or most recently, I go out to the car with my children and they're like looking at me like, "Why aren't your kids in school?" I'm like, "It's Martin Luther King Day." Um, they're like, "That's weird." I'm like, "No, that's not weird." Uh, they're off. They're off today. Yeah, yeah. So I'm just sharing these examples, but within this process, what I want to educate everybody on is I serve also outside of being the 2020 president for the Aria Greater Denver chapter. I also sit on the diversity task force at the Denver Metro Association of Realtors, and I'm also on the global task force of CAR. And what we did was we formed a committee and we started to address discrimination in real estate because currently, if you go talk to Dora, and ask them how many complaints there are, they actually say there's really not that many. And the reason why there's not that many is because nobody's speaking up. They don't have cases to talk about because a lot of people don't even know where they're going, where they could go to talk about discrimination. What we've done is we've educated people on what could happen or what steps you take when you're actually discriminated against. I just didn't actually realize in the process that I would be discriminated against myself. Um, I I did something very bold last year. The Department of Justice had called me from Washington D.C. because I had been quoted in a newspaper article about discrimination, and they said, "Have you ever been discriminated against?" Or I was like, "Well, I sit on a diversity task force, and there have been cases of discrimination." I said, "Would you like to come out to Colorado and meet us?" And they said yes. So I got the Department of Justice to come out, and I lined up about 17 leaders from all of the different communities, and we sat together at a round table with the Department of Justice. And I got, all of us were educated on what was legal, what was not legal. So back to your point about your children making noise, same thing happened with our HOA. At first, it was complaints about the workers, and then all of a sudden we were too noisy. But the place where they were complaining about the noise was the children's bedroom, and it's actually against the law to complain about per the Department of Justice about children. That's like complaining about the baby crying. How could that be a complaint, a valid complaint? And so they started to do things to my family, such as make us carpet the bedrooms to alleviate the noise. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm a realtor. There's 10 other listings, 100 other listings online with hardwood floors in the bedroom. Their response, that has nothing to do with you. I'm like, how is that different? My son has a chest scope and allergies, and completely disregard that. Um, Most recently, they entered our property without even knocking, just walked in. And I said, where do you have the right to do that and enter our property without um, being able to knock? Where in the bylaws does it say that? So I rounded up people from the diversity task force. I actually invited 2 members, Milford, and a couple of the other members of the diversity task force came into the last HOA meeting with me. And they had their legal counsel present, and they said, who are these 2 people? And they said they're advocates in the community. And the HOA asked them to leave. And upon leaving, Milford says, well, they're going to record the meeting. And they said, no, you're not allowed to record the meeting by law. And that's actually not true. So they asked our 2 witnesses to leave the room, didn't allow us to record the meeting, and just proceeded with the meeting. So anyways, long story short, there is laws and there's ways that you can get around it. The Department of Justice has laws. I went straight to them and they said you have to prove a pattern of behavior. And so I'm going to start that pattern of behavior in this building, because if I don't start it, there's not going to be a record of it. There's so many times that I feel like I have to just walk away. I don't have time for this. I'm a mother, I'm a realtor, I'm trying to earn a living. This takes up too much time. But then I stopped myself and I said that if something happens and you see it and you don't do something about it, you're part of the problem too. And what kind of advocate would I be in my community if my own children are being discriminated against and I don't fight it? So I went to HUD, and they have found 3 violations against the HOA. And I actually addressed it at the last meeting, and they said, what does HUD have to do with us? What does fair housing have to do with us? And I said, just so you know, fair housing trumps HOAs. And so in that regards, they should start paying attention. And it was the first time I ever seen the legal counsel speak up in a meeting. And she's basically telling her members of the board to be quiet, because I started addressing every single thing that they had done to my family. They made a joke about maybe you could pave the way for other families to live here, and laughed at us as we were walking out. I'm like, that's fair housing. And they're like, well, we didn't mean it like that. We meant it wholeheartedly. You can't make statements like that to any community. If you were to say that to the gay and lesbian community, the African American, Hispanic, you couldn't say, oh, maybe you can pave the way for other Asians to live here, or you can pave the way for other so and so to live. You can't say things like that. And so I am actively fighting this. I've went to HUD, and I think because it's been opened up, and part of the alliance that I set in, they're gonna try to take it back to the Department of Justice. And if anybody wants to talk about how to go to bat with HOAs, with laws that they can and cannot do, then please speak to me about it, because I've been educated in this process of what I've dealt with in the last year. Sorry, that was a lot, but
Good for you.
HOAs.
Yeah.
First of all, every time I speak in front of an audience, I always have to stop and think to myself, how many people am I going to offend before I leave the room? So let me start with this question. I know one of you has belonged to an HOA. How many of you have belonged to an HOA? Whoa! I guess it makes sense with realtors. Actually, a lot of lawyers tend to belong to HOAs. Um, I guess I'm going to tell a personal story, and I really hate doing that. I like talking about my clients. I hate talking about myself. But I bought a condo. I won't give you the zip code on that one. And first place I ever bought. And when I bought it, the condominium came with an accessible. I'm sorry. It came with a parking space, right? So there was a parking garage under the building, and my condominium happened to be assigned to a regular parking space. Within the parking structure, there were, luckily, extra spaces. Why? So if you had two cars, you could what? Spend a hell of a lot of money to buy a second space. That's all fine, right? Well, there were two accessible parking spaces in the building. Those two spaces were already taken legitimately by residents who had bought condos before I did and needed to use those spaces. In fact, one of them was a friend of mine. But so the question became, could they make an accommodation to allow me to park in the garage? Or did I have to spend the extra $500 a month to rent that second parking space? I, I can tell you the result was they decided that they would allow me to park and use two spaces. But it took me getting involved with other lawyers and so forth to do that. Some of you may look at that in a different way and say, well, why didn't you just spend the extra $500? You should have just spent the extra $500. But why? I mean, I'm trying to buy a condo once again. It was the first place I ever bought. I'm not a rich lawyer, trust me. I work for a nonprofit organization. We take our nonprofit status very seriously. Uh, but those kinds of things come up all the time. Now, also, in living in that condominium complex, this is a little bizarre. I use a bed that, uh, is electric bed that the head raises up, the feet raise up, and the bed itself goes up and down, right? I don't. It's a very long story and complicated, but um, thank God for lawyers. Anyway, the uh, the the building itself actually was built improperly, and there was noise. They didn't do the noise filtering process properly. We came to discover. But my downstairs neighbor would frequently throw a football at the ceiling or would bang on my door. Actually, actually banged on my door the day I moved in about 4 times on a Saturday afternoon to tell me that I was being too loud. But every time I would use my bed, every time I would use my bed, raise the head, raise the bed, he would either come banging at my door or throw things at the ceiling or whatever, or call me or scream or whatever. it wasn't. First of all, it wasn't my fault. The building was built incorrectly. Second of all, I mean, how many people use like a Craftmatic adjustable bed? I mean, electric beds are not an unusual thing by any stretch of the imagination. But I got contacted by the HOA, and the HOA was on his side. In fact, he was on the HOA. At one point, that HOA asked me to join because I was a lawyer, and I didn't want to join because I'd rather be on the other side. But so it became a long, drawn out battle that ended up in a lawsuit in which the uh, the company that built the building was required to come in and do some soundproofing. But given thought, you've got a condominium building of about 38 units. But I would say about half the people were involved in the lawsuit and the half were not. How are you going to fix that without tearing down the building and starting over again? A lot of people moved. A lot of people took the money and ran. But it's just, it's bizarre things like that that I I had HOA. I mean, I had HOA members just. Yeah, your story reminds me of this. I mean, HOA members just screaming at me about how I was creating such a problem for this downstairs neighbor, and luckily I know a thing or two about the law and what it protects. To make a very long story even longer, the I kind of thought oh boy, how many people am I going to offend? The best part of the story was that when the whole thing ended, there was a settlement. Several people settled. Others went to trial. The trial ended, and my downstairs neighbor was quoted in the Denver Post as saying, "You cannot imagine how horrible it was to tolerate the noises from my upstairs neighbor's bed."
Mm. Could you grab that? For Niagara Rep, we like all the other organizations that are represented here have our issues and have had discrimination against our members and within our community. But I think it's more from what I hear throughout the country from our chapters. It's the community members within the HOAs. So that's the neighbors. We have a lot of complaints about that where uh, unless it's a co-op, because co-op they have to vote on the person coming in, and if they see two men or two women on the application, they can be denied, and it depends on what state they're in, but can be denied, particularly for their sexual orientation. But we get a lot of, I think, uh, from the neighbors. We have tend to have higher complaints on our property, like too much noise, um, whatever. And the standing joke always is, right? If you want your uh, house values to go up, is have a middle-aged gay couple buy in your street, and there goes the housing values. But um, putting jokes aside, uh, a more recent one that happened to one of our own members down in Georgia is his seller called and said, "You need to come over to the house. Your sign was tagged." And when he got there, and this has nothing to do with the story, but he is a very prominent realtor in the state of Georgia, actually a prominent realtor on a national level with the brokerage that he's with. He actually owns the brokerage. And the word fag was spray painted over his sign. And he had threats against him. He was given threats with the neighbors. So fortunately, his brokerage, the state of Georgia, the Association of Realtors in Georgia, NAR, Niagara, uh, came to his rescue and stood by his side and took legal action and did whatever they needed to do to support that. But um, in my own experience, when I am working with a same-sex couple, it's always hesitation. When we go look at a neighborhood and we look at houses, condos, whatever they're looking at, it always the question always says, I know you probably can't legally answer this question, but how safe is it for us to live in this community? And that's one of the biggest questions I get all the time is safety. Are we going to be safe living here? Because in the LGBTQ community, especially the transgender community, we have a very high rate of murder within our community, in neighborhoods where where we're not accepted, and so that always is, and it doesn't matter whether it's a younger buyer or a senior buyer, safety always comes up in the conversation about the houses that we're showing them. So. Okay, so our next question is going to be a polling question. So if you can all get ready for this. Our next question is, do consumers believe that broadly available loan programs are inherently discriminatory in any way? So do consumers believe that broadly available loan programs are inherently discriminatory in any way? Okay, everybody voted or put their input in? Okay, so again, we have, it's changing. Oh, wait. Okay, a little bit more. Okay, so again, as you can see, almost double the amount say yes. So 57% of the room have said yes. 29% say no. 18% say they don't know. So maybe they've not experienced it. I think one of the biggest ones is the VA. That is I think the most blatant one out there. As a veteran myself, I get it all the time from people, and I always say, can I sit down with you and explain to you what this means? This is a right. This is something that we're acknowledging that veteran, he or she, for the service that they've done. I've had veterans that pay cash for very, very expensive homes, but you know what? Money is very inexpensive right now, and they choose to utilize that. That's not for anybody to question. And the process of a VA loan versus a conventional loan is I mean, there's really no difference. It's all about education, and that goes along with FHA too. I think we see that as well through FHA programs. Anything that's not a conventional standard program where somebody's putting a significant amount of money down, people get they hesitate. But I think they hesitate on it because they're just very uneducated. So I think for all of us within the community, it's best that we can educate everybody as much as we can. That's going to be the key to all this. Okay. Um, any discussions about that? Okay. Our next question goes to Angela. So Angela, for NAREP,
Yes.
what is the Fair Housing Act, and can you elaborate on fair lending and why it was created?
Yes, the Fair Housing Act was put together 50 years ago, almost 51, to stop discriminatory practices across the board. And I have a personal story about that too. And I'll get to the other part of that question. Now, I lived, as I told you, in 80205. And where I grew up, I can remember not being able to live across certain streets. There were boundary lines. It was just the way it was. Downing was the first boundary line. They would allow African Americans to live beyond Downing. I'm talking about going east.
Wow.
Going east from downtown, we couldn't live past Downing. It was between I-25 and Downing. The next one was we couldn't live across York. So we made some strides. We got from Downing to York. And if you know the neighborhoods, you know what I'm talking about. And then we were finally able to go from York to Colorado Boulevard. Follow me. We're going east, people. We're going east. And then finally across Colorado Boulevard. And sadly, because we thought we had made it, quote unquote, people were complacent and we were good. We were able to get across certain boundary lines that were created not by us. I've seen old maps and old books from lenders and realtors that were literally drawn lines where we could not go. And they could discriminate that way, as you know. And so the Fair Housing Act, now that it's in a place, why are we worse off than we were before the act? And I'm going to do a Joan Rivers moment. Can we talk? Can we really talk right now? One of the things that's happening is you talked about this with things being seen and not seen. Well, it's subtle now. Subtle, very subtle. Discriminatory lending practices, finding ways for underwriters to, if there's certain things that trip them off, so to speak, that this is an African American client, I think that they're still out there. There's certain things that some of my clients, and I've seen it, they're asking for things that don't make sense in the underwriting process. You're going, why do you need that? And why do we need to get it again and again and again? So, can we really talk in this room about what's really going on and how there is still discrimination in lending practices? And I'm just here to tell you, I have been in real estate now for over 20 years, and I've been an attorney longer than 30. Yes, I'm that old. Um, but yes, I think there are lending practices that are there, and they're very subtle now. So, again, it's about education, it's about finding resources. And I just want to read to you some of the things that NARAB is going to do in this 2020. So I talked about the 2,000,005, promote democracy, building generational wealth, educating on how to keep our homes to leverage the equity responsibly. That's a real issue because I get a lot of things at our office on the law side. We do real estate law, so we do probate work and we do all types of things related to housing and related to real estate. And that is a huge one. We get a lot of people of African American descent in our office whose parents are aging, who have inherited homes, who have to go to court to get the probate resolved first before they can sell a property. And they're just selling them just because they don't know what to do with them. And that's not building generational wealth. We'd like to stay in the neighborhoods where we grew up, but it's just not happening. So we're educating people. Keep your homes, leverage the equity, start that generational wealth building. And you all know what I'm talking about. Educating our agents to educate our home buyers and sellers, educating our community on the home ownership process. And that means from A to Z, picking the right agent, going to the right lender, where you want to live. All of those things are part of what we do as educating the community and educating ourselves. Building trust in our community. The trust factor is gone. Who do you trust anymore? To treat you fairly. I'm talking about in that area. To be treated fairly. Who do we trust? Help create more Black development opportunities, African Americans and development opportunities so we can help each other. Partner with lending institutions to make sure that they understand we know what's going on. It's about education. Building alliances among other organizations with the Asian, with all of these organizations you see up here. We build alliances with them. And Milford in the back was part of building that diversity alliance community. So kudos to Milford and all those in the room who are part of that, because I think it's important that we, as we know, we have certain things that go along the lines of everybody's organization. So it's about educating ourselves and creating those alliances so that we can come out strong as people who really know and want to make other people aware of the issues. So, yeah, in answer to your question, I think there are lending practices out there, even in spite of the Fair Housing Act, that still exist and that we still have to conquer together. No matter where we lie in the cultural scheme and the spectrum, together we make a difference.
Okay. And then the next one's going to go to Beth Ann. So, have members of your organization experienced complaints from veterans or Realtor members in regard to discrimination? If so, what is the most frequent complaint received?
Oh man, I think that's a great question. Um, we definitely have received comments. Have we received formal complaints? Unfortunately, our organization, VA Rep Denver chapter, I mean, we've only been around for a year. Um, I don't ever want to receive a complaint. we we have not received a formal complaint yet. I know as part of the VA Rep National, they do receive complaints. They receive complaints about lack of information. I never received information I could use a VA loan. Some of those statistics I quoted you. They receive complaints about discriminatory treatment. Even simple aspects. As we heard, not willing to make accommodations. Even not willing to fix those uh, off kilter steps out front to provide me a safe environment. Um, so I think it's just pervasive across all aspects of the real estate transaction process. I'm not even going to say lending because I think it's in lending. And some of the stats I quoted you, veterans don't even know they can use VA loans a lot of time. So how do we even get to the stage of you've even gone through part of the VA loan to know you can make a complaint? that's, I mean, that's some of the reason we don't see complaints. Um, I would actually ask you if you've heard complaints also with your
Yeah, I think the
veteran
biggest complaint
background.
I hear for veterans is the VA loan process when they're denied their offer, when they present an offer on a home,
Hmm.
and the other side comes back and says, well, a conventional loan won over the VA loan
Hmm.
because you know how the VA loans are, and they all roll their eyes and say, okay. No. So, so that's my experience on that. Is always it's the VA loan, the uneducated part of the process of a VA loan, how it works, the appraisal.
Hmm.
Um,
So it's pervasive across the entire transaction. Again, I'm not going to, call out lending. I'm not going to call out the other agent. You've heard my story about Sean and how the other agent simply wouldn't accept our offer
yeah.
because it was VA.
I think personally, it should be they cannot be denied. You know, like we should not be able to put in MLS that we're not going to accept a VA buyer if the house qualifies for VA.
Hmm.
I mean, right? I mean, it's almost like saying I'm not going to put in MLS. We're not going to this home is not going to be sold to anybody with kids. Could you imagine if we put that in MLS? So that's kind of the same thing we do with the VA because we have the option of putting yes or no for a VA buyer.
Yeah. Why does it target the person who's
I don't know.
speaking?
That's why I like it over here.
I'll quote you another statistic also. Well, this isn't quite a statistic, but some of my experience also is when do people enter the military? How old are they? 17, 18 years old, something like that. When you were 18, did you know what a credit score was?
Yeah.
Did you know how to write a check? Did you know how to save money? And I think that's one of the other issues that we face is most of the people with military experience, veteran, current military experience, they simply don't know. Um, I've even run into this with a couple of police officers that I've sold homes to. They simply don't know what's going on, how to save money, or what it costs to build a house or buy a home, how to save, how to have a good credit score. So some of the clients I work with sometimes are just building things up from the beginning. And it takes a while. I work with some very good lender partners who are interested in that sort of thing, working with people 6 or 9 months or something, so that we don't get to the point where it's a complaint. And I think that's, well, what are we doing about this? We're educating, we're having seminars, we're talking about this. Thank you for being here. Thank you for learning and hearing the message. So that we don't have these problems moving forward. And I think that's really where the crux lies. Not only the industry partners, but also the veterans having our housing summit. And if you're interested in being a partner at that housing summit, I would welcome you. Let me know. I'll give you my business card. So we have more resources for veterans.
Okay, and then the next question goes to NAGREP. Uh, please mention what NAGREP found in the recent study of discrimination against same-sex couples. And so over the past year, they did a big study within NAGREP, and also Iowa State University had done a study on same-sex partners. And I'll read this from this came directly from Iowa State. It says same-sex partners were 73% more likely to be denied a loan than heterosexual couples with the same financial profile. The research, however, found no evidence that the same-sex couples had a higher default risk. So what we find is that because credit has no protection, and I know it sounds crazy because we have the Credit Protection Act, but for uh, who you for your sexual orientation, that does not fall under the Credit Act. So you can be denied in all 50 states for credit for who you are. The unfortunate situation is because of that, it kind of goes down to the numbers that NAGO have found out within their own members and outside the members is that 54% of a group of LGBT community members were polled about, these were all renters, and about purchasing a home. And 54% of them came back and said that they were afraid to go through the process of buying a home. And the reasons why, one was because of being denied credit. They either through it being embarrassed, humiliated, didn't want to go through the whole process and being let down by being told no. And also they have a lot of fear because again, it goes to the neighborhoods. They don't know if they were to buy a home, if they're going to be accepted in the neighborhood, because of course we don't talk to anybody about when you buy a home and then your neighbors meet you afterwards, and then that's when everything comes out of the woodwork as far as discrimination. So a lot of them say they just feel they would, 54%, and this comes from a much younger crowd too. So this is, like elderly LGBTQ community members. This is like millennials. A lot of this came from the millennials. So that, to me, really breaks my heart to think that our younger communities are living in fear. When we've progressed so much on, over the years of what we got, but when a 20 or 30 something says that they're afraid to buy a home in the United States, I mean, to me, that's alarming, but it's also heartbreaking to hear that. And again, could you imagine the 54% that said they're afraid to purchase a home and go through the process? What again that would do to the economy when the people that are in that process on goods and services, has hit the $1 trillion mark per year. I mean, $1 trillion a year gets processed through the community. And imagine if we increased 54% of that more into home ownership, what that would do to our economy and the communities. And then, the other thing that I just want to mention is that, we still have 29 states that discriminate against us to buy a home. And that comes right down, and just putting politics aside and party affiliation and all that to the side, is that, again, what's very heartbreaking to me, as a family of immigrants, is that our very own president, who should be representing everybody, okay, and again, put party aside, put political ideas aside, is that the president of the United States should be representing every single citizen in our country. And when the president says that if a bill comes to my desk that says that you can't discriminate against somebody, I'm going to veto it. I mean, that to me is pretty telling to where we are right now on housing after 51 years of fair housing, and then that should go against anybody, right? Not just my community, but anybody. I mean, to think that that's where our government stands, it's alarming. Okay, so I think we have another audience polling question. The next one is, if your client experiences discrimination, do you know where or how to file a complaint? So if your client experiences discrimination, do you know where or how to file a complaint? Okay. Everybody's got their data entered? Almost. Wrap it up. This one? Okay. Okay, so it looks like this actually is more positive because at least we know the resources and where to go, most of us. And for those that say that they don't or they're unsure, there's a lot of local resources here in Colorado, but I think your voice they'll take it very serious as you go to HUD, whether it's rental or purchasing. If you have any type of discrimination, disabilities, whatever that case is with your client or your friend or everybody that's experienced that discrimination, is to go directly to HUD because they will open a case. They have to open a case, whether it's valid or not. They have to open a case and they have to do an investigation. So I think that's the clear one that, and this is good to know that. Oh, sure.
I just wanted to check how many folks have dealt with the Colorado Civil Rights Division or Civil Rights Commission? Anybody filed a complaint? Maybe. Um, I saw that. Two, maybe. Okay. I can tell you something. And again, I'd never leave a room without offending somebody, but uh, our experience has been that honestly, you talk about HUD and DOJ. Go to the federal agency. We have so much trouble with the state agency now. Now, one of the problems is that so often federal laws don't protect the rights of, uh, of people who are gay, lesbian, and transgender, and so forth. So then you have to use your state law. You don't have a choice. But we just, especially on disability discrimination claims, um, the it's CCRD here, they no cause something like it doesn't matter what it is, employment, housing, so whatever. I have taken cases that were filed, housing cases, in fact, three that were filed with the CCRD where they found no probable cause to find discrimination. I have then filed a lawsuit in federal district court, and we either settled or we successfully won the lawsuit. So, in other words, I at least on disability, I don't know how it is for other topics. Um, they're really not doing a very good job at the state level. So, just something to consider. But you've got HUD, you've got DOJ. It was funny. Last, okay, we're not going to talk politics. Last administration, I had everybody at the federal DOJ disability rights section of the Civil Rights Division on speed dial. I don't know any of them right now, so, but they're still helpful. I mean, they're still way better than what we found at the state level. I don't know if others have had a different experience, but I just wanted to chime in.
Okay, so we have one more question. We have one last question, and then turn it back over to Natalie. So this is for all panelists. Where can Realtor members and members of the community find additional resources to encourage and foster inclusion, diversity, and equality?
Obviously, any of these associations would help you in that regards. Like I said, at the Denver Metro Association of Realtors, we started the Diversity Task Force, the Community Alliance, which it started there, and then I know a lot of the other associations have since followed suit and started to start their own organizations within CAR, within SMEDRA, and all of those places. Honestly, after hearing that the Department of Real Estate say there's not enough complaints to go through because it doesn't happen, I would go straight to your organizations or these task force because they have members that represent each of the task force. And sometimes your voice, within one community isn't loud enough, but when they're hearing it from 4 or 5 different organizations, which is about to happen at my HOA, remember this face because you guys are probably going to see me on TV soon over this, but um, go to those organizations and, we could be the voice for people, outside of what is it, the Department of Real Estate. Because together, when there's 5 different organizations, like I said, that's probably where I would start first. This didn't exist before, but as of a couple years ago, there are task force now. So my recommendation would be to go straight to the task force.
And I would agree with you that we do have the resources and we are constantly educating ourselves so that we can help educating the public. So if you know realtors and you want to reach out, you have a specific issue, I agree that we are here as organizations and collective organizations. As we said, we want to create alliances with the organizations that are here, and we all have common goals in order to make sure that some of these practices and the things that people are seeing to help foster inclusion and diversity in this industry, because I think it's important that, again, I mentioned it before, together we can make this better. And if we're not working together, a house divided will fall, and we're going to continue to see these things happening. So I believe that we are the best and first resource for you. You can always go to nonprofits that are out there that may have a particular mission or a vision or a goal that may help with your particular situation. But if you just talk to any realtor, and if we're involved in a specific organization like the ones you heard today, then I think we're one of your first lines of resources, and we can help you get to what another level if you need to, in order to get your answers and to start solving some of the issues that we presented today.
I definitely echo what everyone else said. I would also recommend to start in here to just stop and calm down for a minute and think of what situation are you seeing, what situation is taking part, and what is the background of the person that you're interacting with, because a lot of times there's so much below the surface that you don't see. um, I've participated with a couple organizations. Need some water. Ooh, it's a long day. I didn't kick it over yet. But I participated with a couple different organizations. Oh, you're the best. Who actually do a lot of PTSD support and training, actually. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, let me know afterwards. I'll give you the resource. But it's right now what I'm doing is a series of webinars, 15 different classes, 1 hour each. You can handle a 1 hour webinar, right? Just after this. They're wonderful, wonderful classes, and they all go all the way through from homelessness to home ownership with a veteran. And there's lots of different stages, and people get in trouble and things happen, and we've got experiences in here that are difficult to handle, and maybe that's put us in a situation of homelessness for a while. I'm not saying these are all the clients you deal with, but just start with the inside of figuring out what's going on for a particular person. Learn about different situations by being involved with these organizations, these networks, and these events. um, to learn what you can, and from there, you'll be a stronger agent or lender or title company or whatever you do in life. But you're going to be more respectful and act with dignity for whoever you're dealing with, not just veterans, but anyone.
So I'm going to ask you this. ¿Cuántos de ustedes hablan español? Que lo pueden entender bien, lo pueden hablar y explicar contratos a los clientes. All right. Very good. So before the recession of 2007-8, we have to clean up house. A lot of people was not doing the right things. A lot didn't know the contracts and stuff. And NAREP, they pretty much, the main goal was to educate its members to do the right thing. But also in the process, when a Hispanic realtor learns, they learn about FERPTA, and that's a very, very delicate. Even the way that the contracts are written right now, you be very careful with that one, okay? Because you can fall very easily, really easy in the discrimination part. I had to stop one closing one time just because the buyer's agent decided to say that my client was a foreigner because he didn't want to speak English. I translate for him. He does speak English. He preferred to do everything in Spanish. And when the other agent heard that one and then the table mentioned that, we had to stop the closing. And he said he's requesting FERPTA to be changed the way that it was. And it couldn't be that way. Easily, we could go after this agent and the client for discrimination at that moment. We didn't do it. We talked, we fixed everything. But one of the things is that happened in that time, and it was very easy for the lawyers to jump in. I don't know why they didn't do in that time, but it was a lot of money to be made in that moment when people use kids to translate. So be careful with that one. These kids, some of them, many of them have been born here and they learn Spanish in their home. but they don't know the legalities. They don't know the legal lingo that goes with legal contracts. So you find a lot of problems in that one. And it's very easy when somebody comes to me and he tells me this is how this contract went, to just turn them over to the commission. So a lot of people last in the last recession ended up paying big fines, their license taken away, some of them going to jail for utilizing. They know the right. It's a right way to do it. You want to use a translator, a professional translator, use it, but never use a kid. I will tell you that because you put yourself in a high way to be sued right there. So that's not they have titled these things. So the way that we have in place is just educating our members so they can do the right thing and be able to pass it to the clients so the clients will be also aware of everything that happened and how the education is gonna impact our community because like I mentioned the NAR 10 that is gonna be in July, it talks a lot about how we are educating our clients to position themselves in being the top 10 in their industry of what they do, be some of the best of what they can be and what they do for work. So they can also be a more powerful force, in more money influx into the economy. I would say, yeah, we have a lot of ways to educate them.
I may have mentioned I'm not in the industry. Uh, I want to, on a happy note, we're running out of time. I cannot believe I was so impressed when my boss asked me to do this that you guys are even doing this. I mean, how many industries are realizing that these problems exist and making sure that they pull together the different communities to solve problems? And so I want to thank you all. I think this is just fantastic. Second, I want to follow up on what you were talking about just a moment ago. I deal with this issue all the time. I represent a large number of deaf clients. So, how many of you have ever sold a home to a deaf client? Deaf? I, it's actually it's funny. I use Dragon Naturally Speaking to talk to my computer, and whenever I say the word deaf, it types deaf. It's just a problem. In any event, well, so how many? I see your hand, and okay, it's interesting because people do not believe me when I tell them it doesn't matter who you are. If you're a realtor, if you're a lawyer, if you're a dentist, you've got to hire a sign language interpreter. You're not allowed to rely on the spouse. You're not allowed to rely on the child. You got to do it. It's going to cost you money. And you know what? It's a part of doing business. And we should be okay with that, shouldn't we? I mean, it's just there's a lot of cost to doing business. So, last thing I wanted to mention, just then I know we only have a few minutes left. Um, Before I mention the fact that the Fair Housing Act only covers uh, multifamily housing and not single family homes, one thing I would just love realtors to think about and really love home builders to think about. There's a concept out there, some cities in the country have actually incorporated it into their building code. The United Kingdom has incorporated it throughout the United Kingdom. It's called visitability. Anybody know what that is? All right. And visitability.org. Visitability.org. Real easy. We'll tell you everything you need to know. When the movers who moved me into my house, which was already redesigned to be made accessible, they said, this was the most amazingly easy move I've ever done in my life. What visitability calls for is one level entrance into a house, hallways that are passable and usable, and one bathroom that meets the very, very basic Fair Housing Act guidelines. We're not talking about a giant stall and a big thing or whatever. If you look at the Fair Housing Act regulations on bathrooms, they're very minimal. So what's the concept? Visitability. That means I can come visit you. So for Thanksgiving, when you invite me over, I'll come have turkey with you. Uh, you know, so it's a concept that's out there. Home builders will fight it. You know what they say? No one wants to buy a handicap house. People come to my house. It's wide open spaces. The former owner, I don't know if you know the 80222 area code or zip code. Sorry, but they're many one-story homes. My house doesn't have a basement. Uh, why in the world wouldn't it have one flat level entry and a way to get into the bathroom? I mean, it's not a big deal. It's real simple. So I don't know if you guys really have a lot of control over that, but when you're thinking about diversity and you're thinking about inclusion, I can't get into your house. I'm so happy you guys are doing this.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much. Did everybody learn something new today? Yeah. Awesome. So thank you to all of the panelists, Vincent for emceeing. We do have one follow-up question that we'll wrap everything up with, but think you guys all committed to about 4:30. So I would just want to go through a couple of housekeeping pieces. We have all of the questions that came in from the audience members, and I'm going to apologize because we did run out of time. But what I'm promising you and voluntolding our panelists is that they'll come back and shoot a quick video for us to answer those questions, and then we'll post them on the SMEDRA Facebook page under the Diversity Committee so we can get all of those questions answered for you guys. So thank you guys in advance for shooting videos for us. One thing I know for sure is we could not have packed this much information into a 1 hour session. So thank you for your commitment to give us 2.5 hours of your afternoon. I know that you guys are all busy. We're entering busy season for real estate, but I think there was a lot of valuable information here. And our affiliate associations and organizations have tables in the back. So I want to make sure that I give you guys all time to go and visit those tables so you can, they're all volunteer-led organizations. So if you feel so inclined, you can now sign up to volunteer. And if you're trying to figure out who's volunteering, look in your seat. That's who's volunteering. So thank you guys. With that, we'll jump right into the last polling question. Which people have already started plugging in. So if you could, in one word, describe what an inclusive community looks like to you, what would that word be? I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to do that. Or if it's on the board, that's okay. Beautiful. Love that. Thank you. You guys keep plugging those in, keep sending your words in. I would like to challenge all of you guys to take a picture of this word cloud because this is what it's all about. If you did not pick up on it today, our industry plays a key role in weaving together what our communities look like. We understand there are challenges that we are up against, but we also understand the importance of addressing those challenges head on. If you want to take selfies with the word cloud, that's great. I would encourage that. Post it on social media, tag friends and family. family members as well, and to our panelists and affiliate partners that joined us today. I can't thank you guys enough. This is not the last time that we're all going to get together in a room, because we all have the same mission when it comes to creating what we want our communities to look like. So with that, I think we are all done. Yes, thank you guys. Don't forget to visit the tables in the back. They have plenty of information for us.